Ladies and gentlemen, history has been made. And unlike some wrestling promotions that lie about making history, this is an actual historic moment because this, ladies and gentlemen, is the first ever non-football related episode of here on the Sports Agents of Chaos YouTube channel. Now, we have talked plenty about non-football things in parts of episodes that had football. This is just straight non-football here. You can tell by the title. This is hockey, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm so very excited to talk some hockey. Iceman Jurg entering you in. It's really these kinds of shows where the Iceman aspect of my name actually finally makes some sense. And here, joining me on this one is two very special guests and friends of mine. I've talked hockey with both these men. I've talked other sports with both these men. I've been on a number of podcasts with these two gentlemen, and now it's finally a meeting of the hockey minds here. Some of the best hockey speak in the world is going to happen around this episode. At least we think. Joining me on the top of the screen here, my guy, JB. JB, how we doing, brother?
I'm doing good. It's 11:37 p.m. here in Korea. It's about to be.
Yeah, he's in Korea, by the way, Rick.
Yeah. It's about to be. It's about to be Thursday a.m. here. So yeah, just finished workup. The weather is not too good here. It's been raining a lot, actually. The weather was actually nice a few weeks ago, but now last night it dropped down into like the high 40s actually. So a little chilly here right now.
Yeah, but weather's just been weird all around. Like Rick said, it was similar for me. Like I woke up today and I'm hearing rain just pouring and pounding on the windows.
Yeah.
And like 15, 20 minutes later, I'm starting to make breakfast and just nothing. And I'm like,
yeah,
what is this duality here? Speaking of which, maybe the biggest example of the duality of man on the bottom of the screen in his car, because ladies and gentlemen, he's back at work. Well, he's obviously not at work right now because he's doing this podcast episode. The Podfather himself, Rick. Rick, how are we doing?
What is duality nowadays, anyways? I think we're like triality or quality or something like that. I don't even know anymore. But yeah, this is a nice venture. It's fun to actually talk hockey when you actually see me talk about hockey, unlike our other ventures there, Jurg. And you know what? The Iceman works for you because I made you keep that name for all of our football podcasts, anyways. So it works.
That's true. It was birthed on bumps and bruises, and it was retained. So
yes.
That's how it goes, ladies and gentlemen. We are in the second round. Let's just get the show on the road. No need for me to give a long dialogue, rambling preamble, because that tunes out the viewers anyways. But on this one, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to just talk straight Stanley Cup playoffs. The first round has come and gone, which the first round ended on the same day the second round started. Great job there, NHL, per usual. But we're going to be basically giving a quick recap, our thoughts on each of the series that happened in the first round, and then it coalesces into us getting to discuss the second rounds of the playoffs, which I think all but one series has begun so far. I think only one series remains, which starts tonight between the Oilers and the Canucks. Every single other series has played at least one game. One of them has played two. Just amazing scheduling going around in this league. We absolutely love it, to say the very least. So that being said, boys, I think like I said, no need for preamble. Let's get things going. Let's start talking first round. I'll leave it up to you guys. Do we want to start in the Western Conference or do we want to start in the Eastern Conference here, fellas?
I mean, a lot more fun things like that happen in the Western Conference. We can just, roll through the East and move on because there were two series that were just DOA for me, basically. So we can just start there and roll through that quickly, I think.
Yeah, I do not blame you at all. All right, let's go to the first round. Let's talk about, kind of preluding to the series that's already played two games. Let's talk about the series that came before that. So I believe the top overall seed in the East, if I'm not mistaken, the New York Rangers. They had their pick of the litter, winning. Did they win the President's this year? I think they did. If I'm not mistaken.
They did. They won the President's Trophy. Yes,
so
they did.
President's Trophy winning New York Rangers, boys, going up against the Washington Capitals in the first round. The Capitals just literally barely crossing the finish line to clinch that final wild card spot. It was a crazy final day of the regular season. Well, second to last day actually of the regular season, because we knew the next day Pittsburgh's fate was unfortunately for them already decided. Thank you, John Tortorella. Thank you so much. But it was that, and a lot of people were saying, well, we know the Rangers are going to win. It was just going to be a matter of can they get the sweep, because it's actually pretty difficult to sweep in the National Hockey League. Sweeps are not as common as we might think. Yes, it feels like every year, at least every other year, there's a sweep. But it's kind of like some of these sweeps are like last year's sweep of the Panthers and the Hurricanes. Like 3 of those games in that series went to overtime. I think almost every game was like it's just extremely close, where a couple different puck bounces, and that could have been a 2-2 series after 4 games, right? And not 4-0. So the only question was, could the Rangers cap off the sweep over the Capitals? And they did. Rangers over Capitals 4-0. I don't really have too much to say. It was kind of expected for me. There were kind of pockets and moments where the Capitals got some goals, but it just was overall kind of a nothing performance. And it almost like you wish that maybe the Red Wings had been able to get in, because maybe they could have taken a game, because the Red Wings had some moments this year where they looked like a really good team, especially with Larkin back. But such is not the case. We're not here to talk about what ifs. We're here to talk about what did happen. And what did happen was the Rangers sweep. Rick, I'm assuming this is one of the dead on arrival series for you. So your quick thoughts about that series.
Oh yeah, no, this one, I think we knew coming down to the last bit, like what team was gonna basically get that last spot to face the Rangers. And you're right. I think conventional hockey wisdom would have said the Red Wings would have made it a more fun series than it was. I mean, look, the Capitals, Alex Ovechkin is still a very good player, even though he's older than, Methuselah at this point, basically. But, you kind of knew going in, this was the Rangers series. The Rangers have just been that team that have been so good over the entire season, and they just flexed their muscles and just dominated. I mean, it was a series that was just built upon how good. Now, again, when you win the President's Trophy, there's that curse that comes along with it. So really the question was, how can a team that hasn't won the Cup in 30 years do in their first series with all this attention and all this play? And listen, give it up for them. They played great. Their team was disciplined. They were set. Look, the addition of Matt Rempe has kind of been, one of the talk of this season. But listen, he's been a bruiser, and he's been helping out that offensive line. And even though he's been a little sketchy at times with some of these hits, but when you're 6'7", ask Dan Chara how those hits are, it's not always that great. But yeah, this one was for me dead on arrival. The Rangers are the class of this conference, and I think Washington, this was their last gasp, because they're an older team. Once Ovi leaves, once Ovi's gone, the pieces around him, I don't think are good enough to really make a run. So this was kind of like, let's get the old man back into the playoffs one last time and see what happens. And unfortunately for them, it was a quick, there's the door, go on and go back to nation's capital with you.
Yep, and they'll stay in the nation's capital with that new arena finally, because Ted Leonsis has stopped being cheap. Well, so JB, your thoughts on the series?
I mean, I like you mentioned. I mean, I would have rather have seen like the Penguins get in. I would have rather have seen the Red Wings get in. Like the Capitals, like they just aren't that good. And I mean, like I think it's just a testament to how shitty the bottom of the East was. The fact that Philadelphia, like, I'm sorry, man, Philadelphia, like they should be ashamed of themselves. And like, look, I don't like the city of Philly. I don't really like. I think that city deserves no sports happiness, but for them to have been in the third seed,
right,
and for them to fall completely out the playoffs, it was disgusting. Like that's the Rangers Capital series. Like the coolest thing about the Capitals is Alexander Ovechkin and Charlie Lindgren's mustache. Those are the only two cool things about that team. And I thought possibly the Capitals could have won one game if Lindgren got hot, because he played very well for them this year. But it was a foregone conclusion. It was either going to be the Rangers were going to sweep them, or the Rangers were going to win in 5 games. I agree with what Rick said. It was dead on arrival. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't blame either of you. I think there's a lot of other situations that could have made that series more entertaining, and none of it involving Washington. And the Capitals are just an example. Sometimes you just need that hot goaltending, because Darcy Kemper, I think it's very clear that, 2 years into this contract they signed him to, just hasn't worked. Charlie Lindgren's coming. This is a guy that Charlie Lindgren was just basically like a backup in no man's land for good chunks of his career for a while now, and then gets this opportunity in Washington. They basically said, like, the season could have been lost if he would have underperformed. But he performed at a great level, and you got to give him credit. He did his thing, but there's a lot of questions in Washington that need to be answered. And I just think the ultimate one is going to be I think we can all agree. The purpose of the team at this point is just for Ovechkin to get Gretzky's record. And maybe if he could get to 900 goals, that's basically it. I think there's no other purpose that the Capitals serve. They want to try to be competitive, as a respect to Ovi, but it's going to be extremely difficult going into next season, where the Red Wings, if they're healthy, I think probably do make a great run at the 3rd seed. Maybe if the Islanders make adjustments in the offseason to that roster, and the Flyers, if they could get goaltending, because that's what sunk them ultimately, right? Goaltending. And they're hoping that the 6'7" kid from Russia that they got, Ivan Fedotov, they're definitely hoping that he can make an impact. If he could be that guy in net, because their other guy was an idiot when he was 18 years old, then that's essentially what they're hoping for. Because I will say it was a surprise season for the Flyers. I didn't expect them to be contending for any kind of playoff spot ultimately. So
not for nothing, Jurg. We were all idiots at 18 years old. So I mean, that's par for the course.
Yeah, but there's levels of stupidity.
There's levels of idiocy. I agree with you, but let's not discount the fact that we were all idiots at 18 years old.
Yeah,
no one here is perfect.
True. But once again, actions make a difference here. That's the context.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we can move on from that first round series. I think we said everything we need to about both sides there. Only just continuing the last bit of praise. Rangers looking great. And Igor Shesterkin, who struggled in the first half of the season, has looked phenomenal ever since the All-Star break. I think he started the All-Star break. He only lost one game, and that was in overtime. And he had like a sub-2 goals against average. If he played like that this entire year, amazing challenge it would have been between him and Hellebuyck for the Vezina Trophy. We'll get to that Connor in a couple moments. We'll get to the other Connor as well in Canada as well. And then the Connor in Chicago just has to wait a couple years. But let's get to the other first round series that leads to the second round series. That's the Carolina Hurricanes versus the New York Islanders. To me, this could have been an interesting series. There were some people that were trying to say, oh, the Islanders, this is a team that tends to perform well in the playoffs just because the style of that team tends to run the players that they have. But I think it's kind of starting to get obvious that you can only run that for so long in this league, like the Islanders did for a good couple of years, back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals appearances. But you can only run that for so long before you realize, hey, you know what would be nice? If you get some goal scoring. And that's, to me, that's ultimately what the difference was in this series. Now, you could also argue between Varlamov and Sorokin, a lot of inconsistent play between those two. I think it's very fair. This is probably the worst season Sorokin's had in a couple of years. Coincidentally, this was also probably the best backup season that Varlamov's had in a couple of years. So your starter wasn't himself the entire year. Your backup, to an extent, I don't want to say overperformed. Varlamov is a very good goaltender. I'm sure teams will probably be trying to call the Islanders for him this offseason because a $2.9 million cap hit for a goaltender that could give you 30, 35, 40 starts in this league, it's pretty good. But I just think ultimately, I always figured the series was going to end relatively quick. I thought maybe the Islanders had a chance for to make it a 6 game, but the Hurricanes offense just came in waves in that series. And the emergence of Seth Jarvis, too, to me was the X factor in that series. The kid came to play, and I think he's shown he's a real big-time player that the Hurricanes will get into a contract stalemate for because the owner doesn't like paying anyone. Just like he's barely trying to not pay Rob Bridmore. JB, I'm going to throw this one to you first. What were your thoughts about this series?
I thought that the Islanders had a couple of chances to split. I thought game 2 was just brutal for you to go up 3-1 and then for you to give up like the 4 goals in the third period. That was the difference in the series right there, because like when you're going against a team like Carolina that has a lot of depth, they're pretty sound defensively. Toronto Maple Leaf fans will disagree with me, but Freddie Anderson is a pretty good goalie. I know that like he has had like some moments in the postseason where he doesn't look good, but I mean, overall, other than the years he was in Toronto, he's been a pretty good goalie. When you have a chance to beat a team like Carolina on the road, you have to do it, man. And they didn't do it. And like, they had leads in game 1 and game 2 in the third period, and they lost both the games. That was the series right there. And kudos to the Islanders because they looked like they were dead in the water, and Patrick Wall came in and he got them to play pretty decent. They went from I think at one point, like in the beginning of February, I think Puck Money only had them as like, I think 15% odds to make the playoffs. And not only did they make the playoffs, but they got that number 3 spot in the division. So, I mean, I give credit to Patrick Wall for getting them to come in and getting them to play pretty, good hockey. But yeah, like the series, once the first 2 games ended, it was over.
Yeah, Rick, I think you can agree with that. The Islanders, it was early in the series when they had the chance to make it something, but they blow those leads. And Rick, your thoughts on this, because JB and me were actually talking about this before you joined backstage. I think JB said it perfectly, is that a 3-0 lead is just not safe in this league anymore. A 3-goal lead is not as set as it used to be because of the talent.
Well, it's funny. They always talk about leads in like soccer and how a 1-goal lead is never safe. And you're right, and when you have faced a team that has the high-powered offense that Carolina did with Jarvis, with Sebastian Aho, it's not safe. It really isn't. And to JB's credit, you mentioned Freddie Anderson. I'll pull back the curtain a little bit for you so you know something about me. I'm a Ducks fan. We kept the wrong goalie. We kept John Gibson instead of Freddie Anderson, and Gibson was terrible this year. Freddie Anderson showed you that he belonged in cage for Carolina. But yeah, I mean, the Islanders.
Oh, and he's gone. This tends to happen every once in a while when it comes to the Podfather.
So few
there we are.
wins. So many overtime
decisions, basically, is what happened to them. Like, they went in with, what, 36, 38 wins?
Yeah, not a great record.
The Red Wings had, what, over 40? And it's like, how do you have less than 40 wins?
And the Wi-Fi goes. His Wi-Fi is on the clock as the other thing is. Now, to Rick's point there, I'll just take the quick look at the standings, and he has a point. The Detroit Red Wings finished with 41 wins on the season. The Islanders finished with 39 wins. But like Rick said, it's all those overtime losses, and Gary Bettman's NHL.
Yeah, and I don't like that. And also the other thing too, Washington made it over him, and Washington had less wins, but because Washington had more regular, I don't like that. Like, I don't like the tie breaks. I think it should come down to like how many wins you have. That should be a tie break, not regulation wins. Because if regular, like because you're rewarding an overtime loss. It makes no sense. I know the reason why they did. They did it because they were like, oh, teams with a lot of overtime losses are still going to be in playoff contention, and the fans are still going to come. But like, to me, like, it's just I don't like what the NHL does with the tiebreakers and stuff like that. Like, I think it should just come down to how many wins you have. Because you're saying regulation wins matters, but then at the same time you're saying that overtime losses matter.
Right.
You know,
I think this was the first year, JB, to your point, and I think Rick was probably going to get into it as well. Like, this is the first year that the first tiebreaker was just regulation wins, and not what it's been for so many years, which is regulation and overtime. And it's like you were saying, is like you're rewarding overtime losses, but you're not rewarding overtime wins anymore. I think I think the league needs to look into that for sure, because like this is a situation where Detroit and Washington both finished with the same amount of points, and regulation wins, Washington at 32, Detroit at 27. But if you go to the old tiebreaker, which was regulation plus overtime, Washington at 36, Detroit had 38. So to me, it's one of those things where I think this was the first year of the implementation. I think they already need to go back on that. I think they need. I mean, realistically, they should just go back to the 1 through 8, and not all this top three wild card. But while we wait for that,
they need to go back to the 1 to 8, man, because it's just it's and you end up where one team ends up getting fucked because they're going to end up going against a really, really good fucking team. Like, poor Winnipeg. And I think that we all kind of had Colorado's favors. Winnipeg ends up with 110 points, and your reward is you get to go against Colorado. Come on.
Yeah,
come on,
and that's a second round caliber, even third. Like you look at it, the Jets.
Well, sorry to cut you off, but you look at Dallas and Colorado. Dallas and Colorado should be could potentially be the conference finals. We're getting that in the second round.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where it happens. Like if we took the league and we made it a traditional 1 through 8 again in both the East and the West. So like, let's just go to Winnipeg here. The Winnipeg Jets would have been the second overall seed in the Western Conference because they had the 110 points. The 7th seed would have been the Nashville Predators. So you're talking about Winnipeg versus Nashville, Winnipeg versus Colorado. That's a significant difference right there.
Winnipeg probably wins this year. Winnipeg probably wins this year. They're still playing hockey right now if they go against Nashville. And but it is what it is, man. The NHL does they do some weird shit when it comes to playoffs, and they're like, "Oh, we want the rivalry. We want the rivalries." Like, you don't want the Capitals and the Penguins to be playing each other in the second round all the time when that could be your conference house, and you always end up with one unworthy conference finalist, and the other team just steamrolls them essentially. And how's that good for the playoffs?
Or it's that team that obviously should be there. They've gone through much tougher opponents because of the strength of the division, that the other team might actually just beat them only because like it's who they've had to go through. So it's one of those things that we're preaching to the choir at this point when it comes to wanting the 1 through 8. It falls on deaf ears when it comes to Bettman and the league offices, unfortunately. So Rick, we were talking a little bit about, I think, what you were previewing towards, which is talking about the tiebreakers and the fact that the Islanders had that advantage with all the overtime loss, and the Capitals had it over the Red Wings. Just a complete mess. But before internet cut you off, what you were saying.
So before the internet cut me off and the phone heated up and started getting really just spicy over here, because it's spicy over here. Look, the Islanders. There's arguments they didn't deserve to make the playoffs because of all those overtime losses and all those extra points here or there. They're have some good pieces, Barzal, Bo Horvat are good players, good young players for them. You're right, the goalie issues that they have with Sorokin not having his greatest year, Varlamov being really good. It takes you back to when, Nabokov was there, when Thomas Greiss was also around. But, Patrick Waugh's the guy. I think if the Islanders can keep him around and make sure that he's sticking to the message and the guys believe in him, then they'll bounce back and they'll win more games this year in regulation than they did this past year. Because Jurg, I remember you and I talked about this a long time ago when we were doing like midseason recap. I said, can the Islanders win a game in 3 periods? For the simple reason that if you live by UBS Arena, as I do, you'll know the traffic there is a nightmare, no matter what time of the day, no matter what period of the game it is. And so if you have to stay an extra 5 or 10 minutes, it's a problem because, trains, planes, automobiles, not good for anybody over there. So just win games in 3 periods and call it a day. That's the goal for the Islanders next season. Win as many games as you can in 3 periods and make a better run in the playoffs and do something to avoid Carolina, because this is the second year in a row they've been bounced by the Canes, who honestly, if it wasn't for the Rangers, probably would make a run at the conference finals, I think, because they're a really strong team. But right now they're against the buzzsaw, which is the Rangers going into this second round series. Muted.
That happens every once in a while.
It does.
Let's go into that second round conversation actually real quick, since we've we're changing up the format here, ladies and gentlemen. We'll talk about the first round series, then the second round. Rangers Hurricanes, poor Carolina. Carolina's actually done some good scoring in this series, but it's the fact that the Rangers have taken it up to that extra step, that extra level that teams like them, teams that look like they are bound for the Stanley Cup, have the ability to take it to, and that's just get those extra gears in. They have just been outscoring and really just shelling Freddie Anderson, and especially game 1, it was a tale of Carolina would get a goal to cut it, and then New York comes back, and it was honestly the same thing in game 2. I think the Hurricanes were up 3-2. Rangers tie it, and then the Rangers get the double overtime winner, Vincent Trocheck, a guy that the Hurricanes are definitely familiar with, all intents and purposes. He was in Florida for a very long time as well. So it's just one of those deals where, like you guys said, Hurricanes, great team, but just so unfortunate for them that they have to face the Rangers. It's kind of what JB was saying. This is a second round matchup that realistically, maybe in other years, this could be the conference finals.
So. I still think the series isn't over with, man, because they've lost 2 1-goal games. They're going back home. The key is they have to win both of these games. So they win these games back at home, it's a new series. So I mean, you can be 2-2 going back to New York in game 5, and you just need to get that one. And let's not forget, a few years ago when they met, Carolina won the first 2 games at home, and then the Rangers were able to win in 7. So if I'm not mistaken, the home teams won the first 6 games of the series, but then the Rangers won game 7 on the road. So
that was 2022 when the Rangers, and that was a shock Eastern Conference Finals run. They didn't expect the core to be ready for that kind of run that quickly. So that what a series that was. And like you said, everything changes if they can pick up games 3 and 4. That's big. Rick, number one thing to you that the Hurricanes have to do to turn the series around?
Find the guys to stop, because the Rangers have so many versatile weapons that are on the team that can just beat you in so many different ways. I mean, look, you said game 2, it was Trocheck. Other games it could be Keandre Miller. It could be Alexis Lafreniere. There are so many guys on this Rangers team that Carolina's defense, which is a very stout defense, mind you, has to mark every single time out. And just the puck has to bounce a certain way. You saw that in the last game against the Islanders series. The reason why they took that lead was because on that faceoff, that puck just bounced. Use the caroms to your advantage. If you're in Carolina, use the caroms to your advantage, and maybe you'll come out on top. But being 2-0 down, any other team, I would be scared. But Rod Brendamore's team, like JB said, they could go back and win these next 2 games, and it's not unfathomable to say that they will. But even if they're down 3-1, it's not over yet for a team like Carolina. They can still find a way to make their way back into the series. So at least get a split. I mean,
That's ironic. Oh, he's back.
He's back.
Oh, but he's muted.
Yeah.
Rick, we have no audio from you. You're not muted, but we just have no audio. So the Podfather goes about fixing that. It's one of those things that, as Rick is talking about it, as Rick is mentioning it, sometimes. And what I was going to say, actually, I don't think because like you said, you mentioned the second round of 2022 between the 2 teams. I think JB, the big thing for me was the Rangers against the Devils last season. I think back to that series, and I think about the fact that the Rangers dropped at least 2 games in MSG. So this is a Rangers team. Now, granted, this Rangers team playing a lot better, a lot higher of a level compared to the one from last year. But this could be a team that, at some point you think they have to lose at home. And if you're Carolina, you get that 2-2 series tie, you go in and you maybe, and like you said, 2 1-goal games. If you could come in and steal a game 5 and go up 3-2 and put all the pressure in the world would be
Yeah.
on the Rangers at that point.
Well, that's my favorite scenario in sports. My favorite scenario in sports is when the higher seed wins the first 2 games at home, they lose the last 2, and then game 5 back at home, they lose game 5, and it's a game 6 all or nothing. They're facing the elimination on the road. I love that scenario because I think you find out what teams are made of if they're able to pull it. Because generally speaking, if they're able to pull that game 6 out, they win game 7 at home. So
Right.
that's my favorite scenario in sports, like in especially hockey and basketball. That's my favorite scenario. Yeah,
100%. So it's going to be very telling to see what kind of team the New York Rangers are in this series and what kind of team the Carolina Hurricanes. We're about to see over the next 2 games just how good both of these squads really are. And I think we're going to see some of the most, like, we've already seen 2 really good games, but I think we have a chance to see 2 even better games just because you could feel it from both sides. The Rangers believe they have the momentum. They've started out this postseason 6-0, firing on all cylinders. You have a Carolina Hurricanes team that, like, this team, like, they believe they want to break that ceiling for the Hurricanes, right? Like, they want to finally get back there. There was that shock Eastern Conference Finals run all those years back that they ended up just getting absolutely swept in. I think it was 2019, I think, when they lost
and they swept, and they came back. They were down 2-0 against the Capitals. They came back, won game 7 in DC, and then they swept the poor Islanders. And that was when Robin Lerner won. What did he win the Vezina that year, or did he win like he maybe won comeback player of the year. He won that award, the Masterton Award that year, I think. Yeah, but they haven't really been able to reach the conference finals since then. Like, the Bruins were actually their arch nemesis, actually, and they beat the Bruins a few years ago, which ended up being Bruce Cassidy's last game coach there. But man, I think we still have a lot of hockey left to be played in that series, actually. So I think the Hurricanes are going to tie it up. I think it's going to be 2-2 going back to New York. So.
100%. We hope it's 2-2 and hope this series goes 6 or 7 for sure, to say the very least.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the other side of the Eastern Conference bracket here. The Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers are 1 game in, but before we get to that, let's talk about their 2 series. Florida, that one went pretty quick, and I think for the first time they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning in the postseason in that franchise's history, which is kind of one of those, like, that's what I feel like we have so many moments for some of these teams where it like the story of what they're doing feels like they're destined to make it to the Cup final. Like, you beat a team that you've never beaten before in your franchise's history in the postseason. That feels like you're meant to go on a deep run. And we'll see if that's the case for Florida here momentarily. But, let's talk about that. Florida Panthers over Tampa. The best, like, post-series analysis I heard about it, to me, that sums it up, and I'll throw it to you guys in your thoughts. Florida did to Tampa what Tampa was doing to them. In terms of being more physical, in terms of the timely goaltending, in terms of your stars showing up. All of those things that Tampa's gotten in the past, Florida got that this time around against them and just absolutely beat them. Now, to be fair,
better goaltending too.
better goaltending, better everything. And now, to be fair, this series I think could have potentially gone longer. I'm not even talking about Game 5. I think obviously you have a game that ended in OT that went the Panthers' way with a ridiculous save of the postseason moment from Sergei Bobrovsky. Like, it's one of these things that this series could have easily gone to 6 or 7, but it's a credit to the winning ways that the Panthers have kind of developed since last postseason, at least through the Eastern Conference. Not a lot of luck against that one team in the West, but we'll get to that other team here in a bit. So, Rick, I want to throw it to you first. Just overarching thoughts about the Panthers and that big, again, to me, watershed type moment for them in beating the Lightning the way they did.
Yeah, I mean, it's the proverbial just getting over the hump, if you will, because again, even though they had market success last year and they were able to make the run that they have, and they've been a good team for years, the mark in Florida hockey is, well, Tampa's won a Stanley Cup. Well, Tampa's done this. Well, you can't beat Tampa. And you're right. I mean, look, going into this season, we knew that this was going to be a Lightning team that could be dangerous come playoff time, because once Vasilevsky came back, they were back to full strength for the most part. Now, John Cooper's got a lot of things he's got to work on in the offseason, and I know that his guys are a little bit older. Stamkos is a little older. Hedman's a little older. So, they've got some question marks there too, but you're right. The mark of this Florida Panthers team is also the way that Sergei Bobrovsky plays, because he's just otherworldly when it comes to like the clutch saves that he made. Again, that you mentioned it right. That save will go down in the history books as one of the best saves we've ever seen. And the Panthers are just a younger, hungrier team that restocked, reloaded after last year. I love the way that they're playing, and I think, again, I think they would have liked to have seen anybody else in the second round. But again, you cross off that big check mark. We finally beat Tampa in the postseason. We can kind of stake claim to maybe being the best team in the Sunshine State in hockey right now. And I think the way that they did it, the systematic way they kind of beat down on the Lightning will just serve notice that last year wasn't a fluke. Florida, the Panthers are a really talented team with really good pieces, and they're dangerous to whoever comes out of the Western Conference, or if they make it to the conference finals, whoever they're going to face, whether it's the Rangers or Carolina. If they get past Boston, they're a very dangerous team.
Yeah. JB, we talked a little bit about goaltending before the show started here, and I just want to throw this to you because the Florida Panthers, the last 3 seasons, the way this team goes is how Sergei Bobrovsky plays. And Matthew Tkachuk is a superstar. I don't want to deny that. He's clutch. He's amazing. I love the fact that last year he got all the notoriety. I want that to continue this year, both for him and for all the other stars the NHL has. But this team goes, think about it, 2 full seasons ago, they win the President's Trophy because Sergei Bobrovsky, at that point, that was probably his best year as a Florida Panther. Yeah. He is struggling going into the postseason last year. He wasn't even, I don't even think he was the game 1 starter in last year's postseason. I think it was Lyon. But he comes back in and he not even just wins them the first round series against the President's Trophy team that won last year. He gets them to the Cup final. And now this year, a lot better. I think a Vezina nominee, if I'm not mistaken. One of the last ones named. He, again, top seed in the division. Like, this team goes the way Bobrovsky goes. And if he can bring that back up, he struggled a little bit in game 1, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, game 1 against the Bruins. But JB, I think you were talking about, goaltending for your stars in past postseasons. I think the Panthers' success this year, not solely, but heavy it is. Like, heavy is the shoulders that wear the crown. That crown is on Sergei Bobrovsky's head for how far they could go.
Oh yeah, because just to be fair, if Bobrovsky just plays average or a little above average, you probably think that they, worst case scenario, only make the conference finals. They probably make the finals with like the team that they have. I like the Rangers a lot. Don't get me wrong, but I think Florida's a bit deeper than the Rangers are. So, Bobrovsky was really good. I just think my takeaway of the Tampa Florida series was just that I think Tampa is in for some rough times. Actually, I think that they're in for some rough times. I think that next year, I think that they might be fighting for their lives to make the playoffs because they're an older team. What's going to happen with Steve Stamkos? You can't give Steve Stamkos a lot of money with Steve Stamkos being as old as he is. I just think that there are a lot of things that are going to happen this offseason. And I think that Tampa, I think what we have to understand, when dynasties finish, the ending of dynasties is never pretty.
It's a whimper. They almost never go out with a bang.
Yeah, and I think that we might be seeing the end of Tampa Bay. Now, don't get me wrong. I do think Vasilevsky hasn't been the healthiest the last few years. I think that him actually coming into camp next year and being completely healthy and having a full training camp, I think that could change a lot for them. So I don't want to count them completely out, but I think their days of being Stanley Cup contenders at the moment are over. I think that they're in the playoff contending mode. Like, can we get one of the 2 wild cards, or can we sneak by and get the 3rd spot in the division? I think that's where Tampa Bay is at right now.
Yeah, because underrated thing, this may have been the last game of Steven Stamkos as a Tampa Bay Lightning player.
I think so. I think it was. You just look at how he, after the handshakes, he just waited until everybody left ice. It's like he was soaking everything in. Same thing. We'll get to it a bit with the Vegas Dallas series, but Alec Martinez the same way. Like, he was just soaking everything in after the game. And when you see players do that, something's up. Either they're not going to come back, or either they're going to retire.
They know.
They know. Yeah.
They 100% know. Like, this very interesting series on both sides, because I just want to mention for Florida as well, Sam Reinhart is a free agent after the greatest scoring season of his career. He's got to at least test the market to see who's going to be willing to pay him money. Brandon Montour is a free agent on that team. Not the same point production he had last season, but still we can clearly see he's a key cog to that team and the success they've had over the last 2-3 years. It's interesting on both those sides to see who's going to stay, who's going to go. Probably even at least a trade or two from those teams for cap relief. And we're definitely going to talk about that with some teams in the West. And we have the team to talk about that in the Eastern Conference as well, because, ladies and gentlemen, Death, Taxes, and the Boston Bruins defeated the Toronto Maple Leafs in Game 7 in the postseason. I tried to find the meme on my phone, and I think it's just lost somewhere in my gallery. But it was like a funny, it was like, those, not stick figures necessarily, but like those just drawn memes, where it's like two guys and they travel. It's like, oh, we taking the time machine. What year are we in? I have no idea. Let me ask someone. Hey, you, what's tonight's game in the NHL? Bruins Leafs Game 7. I have no idea what year it is, because so many times, 4 times in the last 11 years, this has happened. All in TD Garden too, which really just goes to show. And once again, the Bruins, man. I give credit. I gotta say credit to the Bruins. This Bruins team, I think this was a growing pain series for them, because this is, think about it, that first full year. Now Bergeron retired from last postseason. David Krejci, he did come back just for last year, but then he was gone. They had a lot of questions about them going into this season, right? Because of the fact that they didn't have those guys, because a lot of that veteran core was gone. I think they even said it that Brad Marchand is the only player left from the last team that won a Stanley Cup for the Bruins, right? So it just really goes to show how different things in Boston are. And yet, for how different things are, sometimes a few things stay the same. And that the victory over the Leafs is just trying to. Now, again, I want to say this was a test, because I think there were moments in this series, especially in the last couple of games, where the Leafs kind of looked like they were getting to the Bruins, right? Like you had Bertuzzi and Domi were willing to play that smash mouth style of play against the Bruins that very rarely have Maple Leafs teams played against Boston, right? You had Joseph Woll, who stepped in for games 5 and 6, played phenomenally, stand on his head basically in both of those games. 1 goal out in each of those games, an amazing amount of saves. You saw this probably games 5 and 6 were the 2 best games of Toronto Maple Leafs playoff defense we have ever seen. Because of the fact that the Bruins struggled on offense early in both of those games. But ultimately, it's the Bruins that get the win in Game 7. Lindholm to Pasternak on that just absolutely, like, JB, that's one of those saves where I keep looking at the replay of that save. Lindholm 100% knew what he was doing. He knew if he hits it off.
Oh, that was a set play. That was a set play. I think that was a set play. I think that they maybe had talked about that in the intermission, and it's like, look, because they're in Boston, they know the boards, and I think that it was a set play, and I don't think that as a Toronto defender you're thinking, well, you're gonna knock the ball off the boards, he's gonna swoop in and he's gonna score on us. I mean, it was a set play. It's no doubt in my mind that was a set play,
right? And just the perfection, the precision of it. Pasternak, like, he saw Lindholm, like he goes back and he sees Lindholm ready to make it, like. Just everything about the execution of that last play was simply phenomenal. So you got to give all the credit in the world, and credit to Jim Montgomery. He knew he's a coach that, criticism where it's due. He's had some postseason duds in the past, last year for a big example. But he's a guy that it feels like he knows what to do to get some of his players going. And he didn't rip into anyone at all. He simply said after Game 6, Pasta needs to step up. And what happened in Game 7? David Pasternak wins the series for the Boston Bruins. So that was phenomenal. And I got to give credit, man. You want to talk about, the Leafs have decisions to make, but the Bruins, this offseason is big. Jeremy Swayman is an RFA after this, and he's making himself a lot of money right now. He's making himself a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that kid is playing phenomenal, to say the very least. So,
and I think that you have to you can't do what they're doing, the crazy mess. Oh, he starts one game, the other guy starts another game. Have one goalie and stick with that goalie. Like the whole, like I feel like this, like with hockey, like they say in football. Oh, if you think you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 0.
Right.
If you think you have 2 goalies, you don't have any.
Yeah, for the postseason, especially
for the postseason, because I saw the Dallas Stars do. Dallas Stars do that garbage in 2016. But Kerry Lightman, Antti Niemi, and it's like, no, pick one. Pick one. You can't alternate both of these guys. Actually, I think it's madness, and I think that what do you do when one guy has a bad game and then the other guy has a bad game? Who are you going back to?
Yep. And we saw they wanted to make that happen, and I think they would probably still be doing that plan had Ullmark won Game 2. But the Leafs ended up winning that game. Austin Matthews with the biggest goal probably of his postseason career, which is saying something. And they're like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna stick with Swayman the entire way. Credit to Jim Montgomery for making that. It's funny, honestly, because last year it was you gotta pull all Mark, because it was very easy to see the last couple games in that series against Florida he was hurt, and if they start Swayman maybe game 5 or 6, maybe they probably could have had a chance to end that series way earlier. But this year is the complete opposite of leave the guy in and let him do his thing. And Jeremy Swayman, phenomenal. Joining Tim Thomas and I think a couple other guys in terms of highest save percentage in a first round series in the last 15, 20 years, I think the stat was. Just absolutely insanity what Jeremy Swayman did. And just once again, they beat the Leafs. Rick, I was telling JB this. This was a Leafs team that, they had Bertuzzi, they had Domi. Those guys were being a lot more physical, for the Leafs compared to what past Leafs teams have been. Nylander comes in. He only plays 3 games. Guess what? He had 3 goals. And he had one of the goals in game 7. Like, you can't critique him. He missed half the series, yet he led the team in goals. Austin Matthews, God knows what he was having to play through, because like it looked like he lost 10 pounds at the end of that series. Like some sort of illness that he had to push through. Like, there are certain individuals on the Leaf that you can give the credit to for how they performed. But it's again as a team, and as a team, they fall short again.
Nylander and Wall were the only ones who showed up, though. Yeah. I mean, like I get there's a cultural problem in Toronto. There's a reason why this team always loses big games, and it's a fucking joke. I'm sorry to use this kind of language, but you have a high-scoring team during the regular season, you can't fucking score a goal. They've gone 14 games in a row where they haven't scored more than 3 goals in a playoff game. If you look at the 5 games against Florida last year, you look at some games, they're averaging less than 2 goals a game. You decided to give 5 players the bulk of your cap. 4 of those players are offensive players, and none of these guys can score except for Nylander.
Yeah.
It's a joke. And what I look back at when I look at Toronto is that in 2018, they decided to boot Lou Lamoriello out of the front office when he had put this team together. And you decide to give your front office job, Brendan Shanahan's buddy, Mr. Dubas. You decide to give him the front office job, and I'm sorry, he did not do a good job. He lost basically every negotiation to those 4 guys that have grown up through releases. He lost negotiations to all 4 of them. And that's the reason why they're in the situation that they're in. And I think Dubas I think he learned a little too late, but I remember before he got fired, he made a comment that we saw the data, but we didn't want to believe the data.
He was alluding to breaking up the core 4. And for all intents and purposes, and I think this is all but confirmed, he was ready to finally break that team apart, the core, but it was Brendan Shanahan that stopped him.
And it's the definition of insanity. Here's the thing, and you have to be honest about it. 2021, they had the perfect opportunity to make a deep playoff run. You're up 3-1 against one of the worst teams that has ever made the playoffs. The Montreal Canadiens were a horrible hockey team.
Still are.
They still are. They still are. Ducharme was their coach who got fired the next year, and you blew a 3-1 lead. And Sheldon Keefe is an idiot, and you decided to keep him as like. Do you see him like? Well, teams, when we go against them in the playoffs, they force the Leafs to beat themselves. That's what fucking the playoffs are about. Teams come up with a strategy so you beat yourself. And he says this stuff like he's he's some kind of like great mind. No, you're not. You sound like a dumbass. And they keep bringing back the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. You lost to the Capitals in 2017, which I think, okay, that was the first time made the plus. Game 7, you lost 2018. To the Bruins. 2019, you lose game 7 to the Bruins. 2020, you have 5 playoff games in the bubble at home and you lose to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Then the next year, they put you in the All-Canadian Conference. This is your time to do something. You lose to the Canadians. Oh, let's not break the team up. Let's bring them back together. Then the next year, you lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning. You bring the team back. You beat Tampa Bay because I'm sorry, Vasilevsky wasn't healthy last year. I don't even count that.
And Samsonov played at a way higher level than what we
he was. Yeah. And then this year you lose, and it's like, Dubas was going to trade Marner because Marner's no trade clause kicked in and Shanahan stopped it. And Shanahan deserves to be fired for that. You need to. If it would not surprise me though if they bring Sheldon Keefe back to be their coach. It wouldn't surprise me.
It's 50-50. I think there's a chance if they fire Shanahan, they could fire Keefe, and then they just let Brad Treliving and the new, unless they give Treliving both roles as the executive vice president of hockey and general manager, which other teams have. Kyle Dubas in Pittsburgh. They could end up giving him both. Not sure if that is the move to go with, but that is a potential option.
Well, look too. Here's another thing that I think we're not considering to be a factor. And you mentioned the core forward. You mentioned Marner. Nylander was a big guy this series, but where was John Tavares this whole series?
Oh yeah, no, he's the fifth. He's the fifth. The core four are the ones that are homegrown, but he's the fifth one that you use to line up your capital, and he can't score. He's been horrible. He's been horrible, and like he hasn't been the same. Like, excuse my language, since he got knocked upside the head against Montreal early in that series, and he missed. The way that they built their team is just malpractice. You basically gave 5 people all the money, and if they would have had Lou Lamoriello in the front office, Lou Lamoriello would not have lost in the negotiations to all 4 of those guys. Yep. And I guarantee you, if that's the case, Zach Hyman is still on the team, and we see what Zach Hyman does. Zach Hyman has proven that he's a playoff player. Yeah. Like, the only one who was constantly showing up big in any of these playoffs has been Nylander. Mitch Marner, he has no spine.
Yeah.
He plays very well in the regular season, but when things get tough, he folds.
Yeah,
mm-hmm. Matthews, I want to
juniors. It's not juniors.
I want to give Matthews a post because Matthews has had some bad luck. You see Matthews, he's close to scoring. He has scored some game when it goes and he hits the post. But Marner, what big play has Marner ever made?
He doesn't shoot. He never shoots.
No, never.
Yeah, he doesn't. And he's supposed to be this great playmaker. Where are these great passes at?
No.
It's like they just built the team the wrong way. Yeah. And you even look they always are blaming the goaltender. Look, Samsonov wasn't good for them, actually, but the same thing they blame Freddie Anderson. Why are we not looking at the way we're teaching our guys to play defense? How come Freddie Anderson looked so good when he was in Anaheim, and he looks good when he was in Carolina? But and you had Sheldon Keefe throwing him under the bus. Sheldon Keefe, and this is another reason why Sheldon Keefe should have been fired in 2021. He thought it was a great idea. Let's start Jack Campbell over Frederik Andersen when Frederik Andersen is healthy. Let's start Jack Campbell. Let Jack Campbell be the starting goaltender.
Yeah,
he's an idiot. He's an idiot.
Yeah.
So many questionable decisions with Toronto, and I think finishing up on them so we can talk about the teams that are actually still playing. I think if there isn't a reckoning, I think Leafs fans are going to make it very clear that they're not happy, because you cannot go into another season next year with a majority of this team still there. You just can't. And it needs to be, like we've mentioned, Brendan Shanahan probably fired, Sheldon Keefe probably fired. I've seen too many people mention the no movement and no trade clauses that Tavares and Marner have. I don't think we really understand. Those don't mean anything. How many guys have been traded over the last 5 years that have those clauses, right?
I can even just think can waive them. Of course they can waive them.
They can waive. And again, this is one of those things where we don't know this because we're not in front offices, although I think the 3 of us would do a decent job in front office personally.
Well, yeah.
Toronto, call us. But it behind the scenes, right? Behind the scenes, teams can make it so a guy wants to waive his no movement clause. And I think at this point for both Marner and Tavares, and apparently from reports that I've heard and podcasts I've listened to, apparently Marner was actually ready to accept, this would have been before his no movement came in, but he was ready to accept the reality that he was probably going to be off the team last year, according to what certain people are alluding to. And if he was willing to accept that last year, I think he's probably going to be willing to accept it this year. And wherever he gets traded to, they're probably going to have to end up paying him in some way, shape, or form, or he just gets to test the market after another 90-point season. And for all we want to say about him, there are plenty of critiques for him. This league will pay you for 90 points.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So Marner is going to get another contract. He's going to go. It's just going to be with another team. So So Marner's gone. Shanahan, Keefe, Tavares. I've heard some people say that it needs to be seriously thought that the Leafs try to make it to where Tavares is willing to move it. And with just 1 year left on his deal, it's not like you're going to be gone for so many. You'll be gone for a year, and maybe there's the opportunity. All time heals wounds. Maybe just a year away, he goes back to Toronto on a 1 year, $3 million deal after. Whatever the case is, but there's a legitimate shaking up of this team that could occur, and I think they need to do it because I know he He signed with them on the 1 year. He wasn't planning to sign long-term last year. You need to be begging Bertuzzi to come back to that team. You need to be begging Domi to stay with the team, which I think he does want to be fair. Because it feels like Max Domi really loves like being a Maple Leaf. So like if you're Toronto, people are like, oh, you can't win a Mitch Marner deal. You can't win a John Tavares deal. Yes, you can. Because the victory you get is the cap space to let you keep the players that are actually performing. Yeah. Bertuzzi set up the Matthews to Nylander goal in that game 7. Max Domi consistently plays the kind of style in the postseason the Leafs have not had for years. It's one of these things where people are like, oh, you can't win this. Yes, you can, because you already have the pieces on the roster to replace Marner. You honestly do. Like, it's not the level of skill, but it's what you need in the postseason. Right. And you need to be willing to make those decisions. So
and to JB's last point also, like, and you guys' point, it's a reckoning. Leafs fans need to wake up because Canada hasn't won the Stanley Cup since '93, and it was Montreal who did it. When was the last time the Leafs even got into the finals? It's almost been maybe 40 years, I want to say.
No, well, 1967. They haven't made the finals since 1967, since they last won, I believe.
Well, guys, you know what I learned about earlier this season that absolutely blew my mind? The Toronto Maple Leafs have never won 3 rounds of a postseason in a single year, because when all their cups they won, it was always just the original 6, and you only had to win 2. They have never won 3 postseason series. And I lost my mind when I heard that. I'm like, are you kidding me?
You're talking 50 plus years of no Stanley Cups for a team that prides themselves on being one of the cornerstones of this league. And I mean, kids have grown up in Toronto that have been indoctrinated into being Leafs fans that have never seen their team win a cup. It was like Cubs fans went a whole lifetime without seeing a World Series. There's got to be a reckoning. You're absolutely right about that. There has to be some sort of change, because you can't accept that anymore when all these other teams are passing you by. Again, 1967, Canada didn't even know Florida was a state at the time. And look at where they are now. The Panthers and Lightning are going to finals and winning cups. Just saying.
Yeah. And here's the thing too. I dig deeper. Since 2000, every Canadian team has at least made the finals except for the Winnipeg Jets. And by the way, Winnipeg just came back to Canada, so they weren't even a franchise then. The only teams that haven't made it have been the Maple Leafs and the Winnipeg Jets. And the Winnipeg Jets have only they came back to Canada in 2013.
Right. So they at least were a conference final too.
Oh yeah, they've made the conference final, and you have all these teams that have made. I think the last time Toronto made the conference finals was 2002, and they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes, and they haven't made the conference final since. And they hadn't made it to the second round in what 18, 19 years. So
before last year,
So you have all these teams that have made playoff runs and at least made the conference finals, and they haven't done anything in the last 20, and their fans will I know a lot of people who here in Korea who are Toronto Maple Leaf fans, and they always say, oh well, the league is out for us. The league isn't the reason why you're having trouble scoring more than 2 goals a game. You can say whatever you want to, and I know that there have been some controversial calls that have gone against them in the 90s, but they are just a poorly run franchise, and losing has become accepted. The players don't even look like they're upset when they lose. They don't even look like they're upset when they lose. It's oh well, we expected this to happen again. Oh, maybe next year will be different. No, it's not.
Yeah. Jurg, we do have to move on to the Western Conference, but I want to keep that comment by JB in mind. I really want to know how Maple Leafs fans ended up in Korea. That to me is one of those questions.
Oh no, so there are a lot of expats here who work here as engineers and English teachers and stuff like that. No, hockey is not big here in Korea at all. But these are Canadian people that I know. And
I was gonna say I didn't remember Richard Park playing on Toronto. That was a Minnesota guy primarily.
Yeah.
So last comments for that. Toronto, figure it out. Just simply put, so you can actually be decent. And let's go back to the Bruins real quick. We talked a bit about them in that series. Bruins Panthers game 1 happened. The Bruins absolutely smacked the Florida Panthers in that game 1. We're all definitely expecting Florida to come back in this series, but as of now, it's going to be very tough, very difficult to say the very least. They're a bit rested. They have some rest. I think Florida will end up bouncing back, but again, Jeremy Swayman, amazing in that game 1 against the Panthers. And that the Bruins offense just exploded. It was 0-0 for a majority of the first 2 periods. Then at the very end of the second, the Bruins scored, and it just went completely bonkers from there. So Rick, your quick notes you have for the Panthers Bruins before we do move on to the West.
I think that if the Panthers stand any chance in the series at all, I think that they have to rely on, as you said, Reinhart and Montour. But even, you know what, Carter Verhaeghe's got to be a menace once again for them, because if he's able to kind of maneuver his way through the defense and get those one-on-ones on Swayman, then I think that there will be a better opportunity for them to move forward. But right now, Boston's got that run, man. They have the momentum from the overtime win and from the game one performance. This is a dangerous Bruins team when they have momentum on their side, and I think Marchand and JVR are trying to push them forward further and further. So, listen, if it happens to be that Morgan Geekie gets the game-winning goal in a couple of games, I won't be surprised.
It probably would be him. So I think with that, let's move on. Western Conference, ladies and gentlemen, as Rick had alluded to, some more interesting series here. Let's get straight to it. Let's go with the bracket first that hasn't played a game yet in the second round so far. So the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks are a second round series. And the prelude to that is each of their first rounds, one of the first rounds was a lot more interesting than the other. Let's quickly go to it. The Edmonton Oilers handle business for the third year in a row. It's a trifecta. It's a hat trick of eliminating the Kings in the first round. The Edmonton Oilers defeated the Los Angeles Kings once again. I don't have too many notes to say in this series, other than, once again, Connor McDavid is an alien when it comes to the postseason. Draisaitl was great. Hyman was fantastic. And Evander Kane started to show a little bit of something in that series, which is a danger to the Canucks if that is the case. Oilers are looking great, and they once again beat the Kings. Kings, massive disappointment this season, I think, for a lot of people. Those are my notes on that series. JP, I'll throw it to you first.
I wasn't surprised. I know I had a few people I know. Like, I listened to a couple of hockey podcasts. Like, I listened to the Puck podcast. One of the guys, he's a Kings homer. He had the Kings beating the Oilers, and I think he should be drug tested. Like, I didn't see any path for the Kings to beat the Oilers. I mean, this might be messed up, but I'm just gonna say it because I'm feeling like being messed up right now. I think the Oilers would have won the series if Mike Smith was their goaltender. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna say a 42-year-old Mike Smith who hasn't played in 2 years. I think if he was their goaltender, I think that they would have won the series. I think it may have gone 6 or 7, but I still think they would have won the series. But I just think the Kings are they're in a weird funk. They're not bad, but they're not good enough where they're gonna be able to take that step to like make the finals or be serious contenders. But the Oilers took care of business, and Stuart Skinner didn't poop the bed this series. So yeah, good for the Oilers.
Rick, that was a big thing early in the season when the Oilers were struggling, which is the lack of goaltending they had from both Skinner and Jack Campbell. It is safe to say, I'm not going to say completely solved because obviously, liable for another rough stretch of games, but it's looking good right now for Edmonton. And we've always said they need the goaltending there for McDavid. Could Stuart Skinner be rounding into a form here?
Well, somebody looked this up quickly for me because JB said Mike Smith would have been. How old is Dwayne Rolison? Because he probably would have won the series too for the Oilers from way back.
I think Dwayne Rolison is like 50 or 51.
He could still win the series. You put Fernando Pisani from the 06 Oilers on this team, they still win the series. I mean, look, the Kings did no shot.
Dwayne Rolison is 54 years old.
He still wins a couple games in the series, and they win the series overall. Yeah, no, look, this was another one of those DOA series foregone conclusions. The Kings are annoying, man. They're just annoying. Like, they get there, they're that nuisance. They're like that dog that you try and kick off if they're biting your pant leg every so often. And just the Oilers just a better team. Like you said, Draisaitl played really well. McDavid is the master of distributing passes so that everyone else can score goals, so he can get the assist points and all of that. And it really wasn't a surprise to see Edmonton come out this way and really be as dominant as they were. And, you know what it is? It's a long time coming. That's what it is, because this is an Oilers team that for years has been, they're just a step away or 2 steps away or whatever. And it's like, okay, but when are those steps coming? It's like Toronto, but with actual better results.
Yeah.
Like, you say the results are coming, but in Edmonton, the results are there and they're showing. They're playing really good hockey. They're winning series. They're getting into good positions. They're just running into really other good teams that are in the Western Conference. But this series allowed them to have that opportunity to just showcase their flex their muscles and also cakewalk it a little bit. Because again, the Kings, they didn't deserve to be there. Like, congratulations on making it to the playoffs, but accept your defeat and just go back to LA. Done. Simple.
Yeah, and again, teams that have to make changes. The Los Angeles Kings, I heard a very interesting set of scenario that could happen is that if the Stanley Cup Finals ends this year before Pierre-Luc Dubois' birthday, they'll have the ability to be able to buy him out of his deal. But because it'd be before his next birthday, they would only have to pay 1/3 of the value for it, not 2/3 like it normally would be. But they're not allowed to buy him out right now because the Stanley Cup playoffs are happening. So very interesting. A dud of a move, and I think a big shift needs to happen with the Kings because I think I heard they haven't won a single playoff series since they won the Cup in 2014.
Yeah,
or it's either none or one, which is absurd.
Yeah, no, yeah, they. I don't think they've won a playoff series since 2004.
Since
You know what I'm secretly hoping for. I'm hoping that they don't buy Pierre-Luc Dubois out, and I'm
just because they have to suffer that contract.
Well, no, and I just hope that Rick Bowness changes his mind and he ends up being their new head coach, and they're reunited in LA, and they're reunited in LA with each other. And I think it'd be really hilarious if that ends up happening, like with the issues that they had in Winnipeg. So
Pierre-Luc Dubois might retire at that point.
Well, it is Los Angeles. Anything can happen in that city, so
Indeed, they do need a coach. Real quick before we move on to the next series, which would be Canucks Predators. Rick, I want to relate to you what there's not a lot, but this is the post-playing career section for Dwayne Rolison, for what I'm seeing on his Wikipedia.
Sure.
Okay, following his retirement from ice hockey, Rolison was immediately hired as a consultant to the Anaheim Ducks AHL affiliate at that point, the Norfolk Admirals. On June 10th, 2013, he was named as the replacement for Pete Peters, phenomenal name, as the Ducks goaltending consultant. And on November 2nd, 2014, he suited up in an emergency role after Ducks goaltender John Gibson suffered a pre-game injury.
Of course he did.
Against the Colorado.
Of course Gibson got hurt pre-game. God, he's like a walking glass menagerie, that guy. Jesus.
Oh, man. So as we move on from more Dwayne Rolison lore, Vancouver Canucks. Look, I had a feeling that it was actually going to be tougher than most people expected against the Nashville Predators, and we were very close to this series going to 7. Canucks Preds finishes up in 6. It's like a 1-0 game to end off the series. Thatcher Demko was hurt early on in the series, I think after game 1, if I'm not mistaken, and that really changed the complexion of things. And I think if it's just a little bit more luck for the Predators, I think they could have pulled off this upset for Vancouver, and Vancouver would have had an offseason of just a bunch of questions about this team. But that didn't happen. Rick Tocchet and them weathered the storm, at one point playing their third-string goalie, and they won. So you got to give credit in the world of Vancouver. I think this is, to an extent, somewhat similar to the Islanders-Hurricane series on the East. I think this is sort of that version, but even more so because UC Saros, a phenomenal goaltender. He's great, but literally when they needed it, they didn't get the goal support. And honestly, UC Saros is suffering from Pekka Rinne syndrome, because when Pekka Rinne led the Preds to that playoff, to that Stanley Cup run, the Nashville offense completely just went away against Pittsburgh. And that's ultimately what cost them, because he still had great games in that series, right? And it's just one of those things where help out your goalie. Just straight up help out your goalie in whatever way you can. And I think that's, to me, what ultimately decided that series. I think the Preds were a little bit more offense away from pulling off an upset there. So, JP, your thoughts?
Well, I think the turning point in that series was them losing that game 4. They were up 3-1 with, I think, only like a minute and like 20 seconds left, and Vancouver scores 2 goals to send the game overtime, and they end up winning the game. That was the series right there. You can't lose a game like that. If you win that game, it's 2-2, and then you're going back to Vancouver going against a third-string goalie. So I mean, I just know one thing: that game 6 was not a good watch. Like, I think if how do you say his name? His name is Suter, P.S. Suter.
Yeah.
P.S. Suter. If he doesn't score, I think there's a chance the game is still going on right now.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
We're in like the 28th overtime, and it's still 0-0, because that game is like, where's the offense coming from, man? It's like, oh yeah, man.
And it's the start. It's the start of the 35th overtime, ladies and gentlemen. And Commissioner Gary Bettman has allowed both teams to bring their AHL players on to play the next 3 periods of overtime to see who wins.
Yeah.
Jesus. That would be awful.
What I mean, seeing Yaroslav Askarov come in the 35th overtime in relief for Saros, It would have been funny. No, agreed. And especially like in the series, we saw it in a couple instances, and I think I shared a couple of these with Rick. But it's like an NHL meme page I follow, like would post the teams, just like the teams and the shots on goal, and be like, on this edition of who you think should be winning this game but isn't. Like there were multiple times in this series where the Canucks got 20 shots or even less than that. They got like 12 or 15 shots off, yet they still scored 3 goals. And they still won the game. Like it's just a weird series. This one was right.
Yeah.
Like so that's the way I describe it. But Rick, anything your notes on this series? But is there something you saw like to give credence to Vancouver? The fact that they did deal with a lot and they were able to just squeak this one out.
Well, I mean, I think this is one of our big talking points. You know, further back when we were going over the midseason report, you and I did was could Vancouver good hockey, and they were looking really, really good. But Taki's not a postseason coach. At least he's not right now. Like I think he had maybe won 1 or 2 series in all his time coaching, but that was with the Coyotes back when I think they were still Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken. But I could be wrong about that. But the Thatcher Demko injury was a big key, and I honestly thought, like JB said, all Nashville has to do is hold on to that 3-1 lead, go back to Vancouver, and then they'll probably get Game 6 in their barn. And honestly, I didn't think Vancouver stood a shot. But once the Canucks won that game, they came back and won, it was a foregone conclusion. The resilience of Vancouver, I think, was a big key to this series. But again, you know, it's not befitting of a team that scored over 100 points in the record, you know, going the regular season. It looked like there were still things missing, and you know, luckily for them, they were able to right the ship with Nashville. But I don't know. I don't feel so confident in them going forward because I think there are questions now they're facing. And so is Demko fully back? Is Joey Decord going to at least be a solid number 2, or are they stuck with the 2 and a 3? You know, if that's the case, then when they face a better team like they're facing the Oilers, it's going to be a quick one for Vancouver to go back home, because I think Edmonton is going to toy them basically. You know, in the series coming up, if Vancouver's not right, Edmonton is the wrong team to play, because they will pounce and they will win games 7-1. You know, they will find ways to destroy you, and that's what Vancouver has to figure out a way to right the ship on.
Especially underrated thing to me, real quick. If the Canucks, and I think they were fine in the first round with it, but if the Canucks start to be a little bit too much and they start to get on the have to be on the penalty kill, we've seen in postseasons past that Oilers power play can just absolutely murder teams.
Yeah.
What was it last year? Like they were 45% of the power play in last year's postseason,
something like that. Yeah.
And even the year before that, they had at least had a third. Like this is not a team. If you think that okay, let's maybe up the aggression against Edmonton, if the refs decide to make some whistles early in the series, which they tend to do, the earlier the series, the more likely they are to make whistles. The Oilers will bury you. Yeah. For as solid as they were defensively in the regular season, it's not going to make a difference if you could give the Oilers 3 power plays. They'll score on all 3. They will score on all 3.
They'll find a way to score on 4 power plays, even if they only have 3, because that's how good they are on the power play.
Yeah. So ultimately, that is the case. And my last point, you know, I mentioned Stuart Skinner. There was a game, guys, in that Oilers-Kings series that finished 1-0. If I had told you going into that series, someone was going to win a 1-0 game, you would have assumed that the Kings absolutely had a defensive masterclass. But no, it was the Oilers that won that game. If Stuart Skinner pulls off a game like that against the Canucks, your season's over, because we're talking about a guy that is you know starting to play at levels above what we expect him to, and it's going to be just and to the point I need to see any updates, but I don't think Demko's expected back for at least the first.
He's out. He's already been ruled out for game 1. So yeah,
and it wouldn't shock me if maybe even game 2. Like we may not see him until game 3, and they might be down 2-0 come back.
Yeah. That's the thing, is that this season was really built on the emergence of JT Miller for Vancouver, and then the rise of Thatcher Demko in goal for them. And with one half of that gone, you know, it's tough to say that they're going to be contenders.
And we've seen when times have been tough before, JT Miller sometimes struggles with the need to take leadership. When the Canucks were bad before this year, he was not a positive in that locker room.
Yep, and Rangers fans know that all too well as well.
And Lightning fans.
Yes. He's been around a lot of teams.
But to be fair, I mean, like it's hard to be positive living in Vancouver.
You know, Fair.
I take that.
Very, very fair. So I think, I've said my piece. JB, anything you think, because the series starts today, any preview from your mind of the Oilers series?
I mean, I think that it's going to be really interesting because they're going in with a backup goalie. Now, I am going to say this. I do think that UC Saros is a better goaltender than Skinner. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Can Vancouver score a couple of goals early tonight? Because you've seen before, sometimes, even though they have a lot of firepower, when Edmonton gets down early, they don't play well. It's like they kind of, and I also think that they're still a bit too top heavy as well. I think to keep Vancouver in these first two games, they're going to have to get a lead and get a multiple goal lead actually on Vancouver, and just try to get in their mind. Yeah. So.
Yeah. No, I similar thing. It's really, this is going to be a big test here early in the series between these two teams of what can happen. I think it's going to be something to say at the very least. So moving on from that, last part of the bracket for us to talk about here. Colorado and Dallas have already played a first game, but we'll get to that in a moment here. But we must talk about the series beforehand. The Colorado Avalanche and the Winnipeg Jets faced off in the 2 and 3 matchup of seeds in the Central Division. Once again, NHL go 1 through 8 again, for the love of God. But that series did not turn out the way a lot of people thought. The Avs, to an extent, limped into the postseason. They weren't at their best. They had a lot of stretches of the regular season where they struggled, dealt with some injuries as well. And it just, a lot of people thought going into the series that, this is going to be a time Winnipeg, as solid defense going into the season, Connor Hellebuck, as great as he is, the thought process was, and I don't blame anyone for having the thought, that the Jets were going to play such a great defensive series that they were actually going to cause Colorado problems, and that series was going to go 6 or 7. The Jets were going to win. That didn't happen. The Colorado Avalanche offense completely came to life. After what was a high-scoring 7-6 Game 1 win for the Winnipeg Jets, the Jets offense went away, and the Avalanche offense did not. The Avs just continued to score in droves. They continuously pelted Hellebuck. That the defense as a whole, like that, they just got shelled, right? They just simply got shelled as a whole. And I think it's just one of those things ultimately at the end of the day where Colorado overwhelming offense, I think it's more prone to happen earlier in the postseason, where an overwhelming offense can just absolutely destroy whatever goaltending and defense you had. And I think that was the case here. Just Colorado simply overwhelmed Winnipeg, and that's all the Avs needed to win in this series. At the end of the day, as solid as the Jets were, they were nowhere near the kind of offensive team that could match Colorado.
No, and that was one of the biggest things when they would have these stretches where they didn't play good. It's like they couldn't score, and that's essentially what happened to them against Colorado. I had Colorado winning the series in 6 games. I thought a lot of people were looking too much into like what happened at the end of the season. I just didn't think Winnipeg matched up well with Colorado, even though they swept Colorado during the regular season. I didn't think that it was. I didn't think it was a good matchup for them. And actually, Hellebuck, he's starting to turn to one of these guys. He doesn't play well in the postseason. He has these bad games in the playoffs, and we can say, oh, well, there was a lot of traffic, there were deflections, but he's not playing well in the postseason. He gave up 5 goals in every game. He gave up 5 goals or more in every game of the series. You're not going to win a game like that, and it's unfortunate he had a great regular season, but he was bad in the postseason. And I mean, I think that you're not going to beat a team when your goalie is only stopping 83% of the shots.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's just pure struggles for Hellebuck in the last couple of postseasons, in part because they really do lean on him heavily in the regular season. It was just the case once again, just struggles, man.
And I think that that's something that we have to kind of look at when we're looking at goal. I think that when you're playing your goaltender 60, 65 games, I think that a goaltender is only going to end up being good for maybe like 80 games. And I think that you're going to see him wear down. I think he wore down. I mean, you saw it happen of the year Columbus swept Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Vasilevsky was tired.
Yeah. Vasilevsky was tired. I think he started 68 games that year. That's way too much for a goaltender. You want your guy to be fresh in the playoffs. And I think that Hellebuck was just and it's no need for him to play the Hellebuck that much because they have a competent backup in Brossoit.
So he's one of the best backups in the league.
Yeah, no, and you could have played Hellebuck 50 games and been okay.
Yeah. So,
but they decided not to.
Yeah. So, Rick, we were talking about it. Avalanche completely smacked the Jets up and down. It was just nowhere near the series that people thought it was going to end up. Colorado overwhelming offensively. And then your thoughts on that, and then you can transition, Rick, into your thoughts about what was the other 7-game series in the first round between the Stars and the Knights.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it was disappointing to see Winnipeg come up short in 5 games, but you expected a lot better. But again, the point is there, Hellebuyck just looked like he was done. He was gassed. And a long season like that takes a massive toll on you, and it takes a toll on this team. But again, Colorado's got a really, really strong offensive core, and I think that once they realized that Hellebuyck was tired, that team just, knew to pounce and really kept the offense going. Jared Bednar kind of threw all the offense at Winnipeg because Hellebuyck was just done. And, that's kind of just how that went, I think, from there. But again, listen, there were 2 very good teams, and we saw in the other series 2 very good teams, Dallas and Vegas. But that was nervy for Stars fans, I think, to have a 7-gamer against Vegas there against the defending Stanley Cup champions. But anytime the defending champion gets drawn as like one of the lower seeds, you got to knock him out early, or else make a run or make life really difficult for you. And you saw that. Like, what was it? Was it game 1 or it was game 1 of the second round series with Dallas? I think after they had the momentum because Vegas took them to 7. So in game 1 against Colorado, Dallas scored 3 goals in the first period,
Yep.
And then Colorado just wore them down at the very end and ended up winning that game in overtime. But that's a testament to the fact that the Stars needed to give their all against a very talented Vegas team, because that could have been, I know we talk about like Carolina Rangers being a conference final, but Dallas Vegas could have and probably should have been a conference final matchup at some point, because the way that they were just slugging at each other. Look, I got my money's worth. I didn't go to any game, so I got my money's worth from all 7 games. So there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about that was the conference finals matchup that year. This was the Western Conference Finals, and it's 2 teams. Vegas taking the first 2 on the road, then Dallas takes the next 2, then Dallas wins game 5, then Vegas wins game 6. You want to talk about cool stuff happening? Just the back and forth that we kept seeing ended up going to a game 7. Just phenomenal stuff right there between those 2 teams, and you really saw on both sides. And again, you talk about moments, and this is why I mentioned it before, like when I talked about Florida, of it feels like multiple teams have had moments where it feels like this is the beginning of like a legitimate cup run. This was once again the case with Dallas. Like you knock out the defending Stanley Cup champions and the team that beat you in the postseason last year. That feels like the kind of moment that you need to go on a run on. Now the problem is that they're facing Colorado in the second round, and that is also a very strong team. But all props to the work.
If Dallas is to somehow make it to the finals, I mean, they will have had to gone through a gauntlet. Beat last year's Stanley Cup champion, beat
the year before
Colorado won for Stanley Cup champion, and then probably beat Edmonton,
everyone is anointing them to be a future Stanley Cup champion.
The Cup champion, yeah. So Dallas would have to. It would be a gauntlet if they were able to make the finals, and I think it'd be interesting to see if they made the finals. Would they have anything left?
Right,
because that could potentially be. You have to win 3 7-game series just to make the finals, and the Kings did it, I think, in 2014. They won 3. They won 3 road game 7s actually.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it was all in the West. It was, I think, game 7 against the Sharks in the first round. Memory is failing me on the cool.
They beat the Ducks. They beat the Ducks in the second round,
and it was the Blackhawks in the conference finals.
So they got both of our teams that year. So damn the Kings forever. I will say this too. I thoroughly enjoyed watching Wyatt Johnston in the first round series. I mean, for a 20-year-old kid, he's got the potential to be a star, pun intended, for a very, very long time in this league. And I think that first round series against Vegas, he had 4 goals in the 7 games there. That just shows you that he's immensely talented and really somebody who can build that whole team around in future. They've got some good young pieces, and they added some older talent veterans. They're a good mixture of that kind of core that you talk about the youngsters and then the older crop. They're a very good core. But Wyatt Johnston is he's an excellent player for them.
Yeah, they have the guys who can be the faces of that team going forward. It's Wyatt Johnston, it's Jason Robertson, it's Miro Heiskanen, who to me is still one of the most underrated defensemen in the league. I don't understand how he has not been a Vezina nominee yet. Not Vezina, excuse me, Norris nominee. I mean, maybe Andre handles the Vezina.
Make a defenseman a Vezina nominee. Why not?
Yeah, why not? But he's so supremely talented, and it's those 3 guys, and Ty Dellandrea as well came out a little bit in this series, had a couple goals. They sat him in, I think, for game 7, which drew the ire of a lot of people. thankfully for the Stars, I think they sat him for Radek Faksa, who's come back from injury. Radek Faksa scored the second goal, so that was a big one, to be fair. Some puck luck there. Ultimately, Dallas has the pieces, and just like we mentioned, it's Colorado. So Colorado, Rick already talked about it. Takes the deficit early, like we mentioned, probably because Dallas is still riding the high of being Vegas in that Game 7, and the Avs wear him down, boom, tie the game, and then win an OT. So, JB, because I remember your text early in the Vegas series that you were a bit worried in that, like, your elation of beating Vegas, which everyone was rooting for Dallas in that Game 7, like the NHL community, because no one likes Vegas. Your elation of beating Vegas, and now the road ahead against Colorado.
I mean, it's tough, man. Like, these game days have not been very fun for me. They're nerve-wracking. When I'm teaching my classes, I'm on The Athletic getting updates. I'm on Yahoo Sports getting updates. So, I mean, it's just a grind, man. Like, this is tough, man. Like, I was really hoping that fucking Vegas got the third spot in that division, so we could have gone against the Kings. If we had gone against the Kings, I would be a lot happier. I probably, 5-game series would have been good, and then I could have, prepared. But now it's just been nerve-wracking. It's been one nerve-wracking game after another, and I'm prepared for however long this lasts. I'm hoping that they're able to win Game 2, because if they don't win Game 2, man, it could get ugly, because Colorado had the best home record in the league, actually. Yep. They're very tough to beat there. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be very interesting to see. But Dallas also an extremely good team on the road, as they've already shown us in this postseason and from the regular season. Yeah. So it's set to be very interesting. And I think 4 great second-round series. One of them we know is ultimately going to end up, probably falling short compared to the rest. I think we might have an idea of that. So to finish off this episode really quick, boys, we're going to go back series by series, and we're all each going to give our predictions on how things will end. So let's run back to the Eastern Conference here really quick, and let's start with Rangers Hurricanes. JB, I'll throw it to you first. Your Rangers Hurricanes prediction: who wins and how many games?
I had Hurricanes in 7, so I have to stick with it. But I thought the series was a coin flip. So I mean, I'm not going to say I'll be shocked if the Rangers win. I mean, they should win the series. They're up 2-0, but I had the Hurricanes in 7 was my prediction. So.
Rick, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I could see this going 7 as well, but I say Rangers in 5. I think they'll take a split in Carolina, and they'll come back home to the Garden and win Game 5 at home to just take the series and remove one of the threats in this conference away from them.
Right, I don't blame you. I'll say Rangers in 6. I think the Hurricanes are good, and I think there's a chance it could be a 2-2-2. Rangers first 2, Hurricanes next 2, and then the Rangers get the last 2 to ultimately clinch it out. So there's that. Bruins Panthers. Rick, I'll throw it to you first. Who do you have in that series?
Man, the Panthers are so good, but the Bruins are just riding such a high right now. This is another coin flip series, I think. But I think the Bruins are just have too much momentum on their side. I say Bruins in 6.
I don't blame you.
Too much momentum on their side right now.
I have a similar prediction. I think it's Bruins in 6. I think that team is hungry for revenge from last postseason. Yeah. And I think if they're up in the series again, I don't think they'll waste that opportunity. I just don't. JB, what about you?
Yeah, I think the Bruins are going to win too. I'm going to say Bruins in 6. I think that they feel like they should have won last year, and things just got away from them in those 3 games. And like they lost 2 of the last 3 games they lost in the series were overtime games. So that's one shot. So I'm going to go with Bruins in 6. So.
Yep. So there's that. Oilers Canucks. I'll start this off. Look, Vancouver, I think, has a little bit of gumption there. I think there's a little bit of heart to make it somewhat of a series, but I think it's going to be Oilers in 6, and I could see that last Game 6 just being a bloodbath. I think Edmonton, if it's a Game 6, I think Edmonton blows that series open because the Canucks are the higher seed. So it'd be Game 6 at home with a chance to close out. I think the Oilers could win that game like 5-1. So I'll say the Oilers in 6 over the Canucks. So JB, you first.
I'm gonna go Oilers in 5. I just think that with Thatcher now, if Thatcher Demko was healthy and I knew he was gonna play the majority of the series, I'm kind of feeling a bit frisky. I might pick Vancouver in that case, but with him not being there and just the fact that they had trouble scoring, which I think maybe it's a bit overblown. UC Saros is a very good goaltender. I don't think Skinner is as good as Saros, so they might be able to score some goals. But I just think that with the goaltending situation, I think the Oilers win in 5.
And Rick?
Oilers sweep. Sorry. Look, yes, I believe the Canucks are a better team, but I think that loss in the cage is just too big to overcome. And I think maybe one of these games is close. Maybe one of them goes to overtime. But I think Edmonton's just riding such a strong high right now that I can see 3 of these games being 2 goals or more or blowouts. I think Edmonton's just that good.
Yep, they are, and this is a team. They're kind of the princes who've been promised for a bit, right? Like everyone's expecting it. Everyone's saying Connor McDavid needs a Stanley Cup on his legacy, and he's certainly a cup-winning talent, and this could be that run for them. So we'll see. In the last series, I want to save JB for last because, of course, he's a Stars fan. So, Rick, I'll throw it to you first. Stars, Avs, who wins?
What is this, 1999 all over again? Dallas and Colorado in the series? Look,
1999, 2000.
Exactly. Look, I think this is an interesting series. I think this is a very good battle of 2 very, very strong teams. I'm going to say, because I have this idea in my head of just having to keep going, I'm going to say Dallas in 7. I'm going to have the Stars win this series in 7, and then that means they have to win 2 series in 7 games, and then go on to a 3rd series they probably have to win in 7 games, just to really make JB sweat a little bit more. Because I don't know. I know I just met the guy, but it's entertaining to hear a Stars fan in Korea sweating a little bit. But yeah, I think the Dallas is a very strong team, very good players. I go Stars in 7.
I do think Dallas is going to bounce back after that tough Game 1 loss. I already thought this before you said, but I do think Stars in 7. I think the Stars, JB kind of alluded to it. I think the Stars are just on the side of the bracket where it's hard to beat one of those teams in anything less than 6. It's just not going to happen. And I think whether it's the Stars or the Avs, if they're down 3-2 going into Game 6, I think that team is prime and dangerous to have a massive Game 6 to force that Game 7. So I'll say Stars in 7. I think this could be, Jake Onger has had some good games in postseasons, but he's also had a couple of rough stretches. I think this series could be what is a lot of people's grade on him going forward. Now, franchise goalie, none of that is going to change. He's obviously the guy for Dallas for so many years. But this, I think, is one of those premier series where I think it's going to fall on him to end up getting the Stars the win in this series. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think he can pull through late in the series, especially because I'm expecting a goaltender change for Colorado. I think they've been wanting to bench Georgiev for a while, but they haven't had the chance to yet. We could see a goaltending flip for the Avs in this series. And I think that consistency for Dallas versus Colorado not 100% being confident with their guy, no matter what they've won, I think it's safe to say they're not 100% confident in him. I think that might also be an edge because I think Dallas knows what they're getting with Andre and net. I don't think Colorado does on a night in, night out basis. So that'll be a big one. So both of us Stars in 7. JB?
I'm going to do what I did the last time we did a show. I'm going to abstain my pick, but I'm going to say this. Dallas better win tomorrow. They better win tomorrow because if they think they're going to win 4 or 5 against Colorado, it's probably not going to happen. I could be wrong, but they better win tomorrow. And if they don't win tomorrow, I'll never forgive them. Going down 2-0 back-to-back series, losing Game 1 and Game 2 at home, I'll never forgive them. But I'm going to abstain. I think it's at least going to go 6, and I think it's a coin flip. I'll be honest with you. I think that with both of these teams, it's a coin flip, actually. But I do agree with you. I think the Avalanche have gotten kind of annoyed with how do you pronounce his name? I can't pronounce his name. I feel really bad.
Georgiev. It could be
Georgiev.
Yeah, Georgiev. Yeah. And I'm expecting, because he does a lot of shenanigans when he gives up bad goals where he breaks his stick and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm expecting for Nate McKinnon to choke him out, and then they're gonna put it in the back up. And nobody's gonna say anything about there. The commentators will be like, "Oh, we didn't see that. Let's cut away."
Yeah. It's one or two things will upset Nathan McKinnon very much so. His teammates screwing around and no chickpea pasta in the locker room. We know that's going to be a fact, to say the very least. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this fun impromptu hockey episode. This was fun. This was fun for us to get to talk some hockey here. Once again, first ever non-football episode on the Sports Pages Account podcast. So that's some history right there. But we just got to have fun, sit down, talk hockey for a bit. And boys, let's hope for a great second round in this postseason, and we'll go for it. Hopefully, we'll get to do. I think maybe hopefully post-conference finals, maybe something early in the phases of the Stanley Cup final. It's going to depend on everyone's schedule here, of course. But hopefully, either just before the postseason ends or maybe just following it, we'll get to have another fun episode here relatively soon. So Everyone, thank you so much. As you guys know, at the bottom of the screen is the Podfather himself, a staple on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, which we'll be recording live later tonight. Actually, we have a football episode planned because finally all three of us are going to, between the two of us and Justin, we'll finally have our schedules free. So check back in the channel in 6.5 hours for a live football related episode. And of course, my guy, JB, thank you so much for joining us on this one, brother. Always appreciate you being on.
All right. Thank you.
Guys, everyone, take care, and we'll see you all in the next episode.